This part two is a continuation of a conversation with Dr. Chandra Ward, who is Assistant Professor of Sociology at UTC.
I'm looking at it from the eyes
Anthropology,
of.
anthropology, yes. Archaeology, not so much.
Okay, okay,
Anthropology, just in the sense that, and the whole discipline of anthropology, really, a lot of
okay.
different disciplines since 2020. And it'll be interesting to see how this
Oh,
goes forward.
right.
Have been interested in decolonizing their disciplines,
Okay.
and with I've heard it
Wow.
less with sociology. I did hear I was a part of a conversation this past summer at a sociology meeting in LA, but I know, anthropology has in archaeology has a really bad history, as it relates
Right.
to, othering other,
Yes.
cultures,
Yes.
and, the white person being sort of the expert in kind of taking their culture and imposing it upon others in which to judge. And so we utilize that, the fallacy in that in sociology in gen ed classes, about what's referred to as, sociology being culturally relative or possessing cultural relativism, in which we attempt, in theory, to judge other cultures, not by our own measuring stick, but by their own, and not sort of, make these judgments like this, what these people are doing is backwards, in
Right.
relationship, without considering that it's
Yes.
in relationship to what is considered my norm. And there, are a lot of things in our culture that, are bizarre, increasingly so every day. And so anthropology and archaeology that have been notorious for going into other cultures, and, whether that be messing with other cultural artifacts and taking them for their own, or going into, indigenous communities in particular, and, honestly, maybe exposing them to, in a negative way, to
Right.
the outside world,
Yes.
or, you know reporting on them in a very biased and Eurocentric way. All of these things they've had to grapple with. What the conversation I had over in sociology, which is a little bit different. I mean, W.B. Du Bois is one of our, kind of historical theorists. I mean, he was the first black sociologist. Someone, a excuse me, colleague mentioned something about, in sociology, we're definitely guilty of, as it relates to communities of color, being focused on this deficit model of, like, we talk about black people in the context of the problem.
Yeah, help me out with that because I know there's a lot of conversation around that now.
Yes.
And, you know, is it, would it be detrimental to change the way we speak about deficits?
I hope
I don't
not.
understand because, I'm not a sociologist. So,
I hope not. I don't think. Hopefully, there's not a move away from acknowledging, both superficial and structural differences. Like, I know in Europe, for example, they don't collect data, census data on things such as, race. Uh, the Europeans believe that they don't live in a racist society.
really,
Yes.
they still use the terms
I mean, they
Afro Caribbean. They use terms like that, and
I mean, I was in Europe
in London.
almost a year ago, from the invitation of this, Swiss professor, and he was a not like older white man, but maybe in his 50s, and he was under the
Thank you.
impression.
These young people. I mean, do we have to bring up age?
Exactly. But and I know some younger Swiss people from my time there before who were in college, and he asked me a question that seemed to suggest there's a little bit of a language barrier. It seemed to suggest that the kind of structural issues that we're amplifying in the United States, such as racial inequality and injustice, is being imported or exported into Europe and maybe causing problems because in Switzerland they're not about race, they're just about who's Swiss and who's not, which is still, I mean, what is your conception then of what a Swiss person looks like? But anyway.
Right. But come on.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
I'm thinking about the refugees. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
But so I don't think that pendulum will be swung that far, but I think that maybe instead of sort of focusing solely on the deficits that exist that are
Okay.
not inherent to the person,
Right.
what I heard proposed was maybe more research, because we've researched to death, again, all of the deficits in education and income and
Right, yeah.
wealth, blah 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 blah. That is sociology. We are just knee deep in the problems, social problems. But he was saying, what about Black joy as a focus?
And what is that?
Well, I mean, I don't. It kind of reminded me of what you were talking about with, like, instead of producing metrics, like the
Right.
only way that your organization is deemed successful if there are like all these metrics of
Yes.
like this kid took my class and now they're at Harvard.
Right,
Maybe
right.
the kid had a moment of peace. And
Yes,
maybe that's
right.
worth something.
Yes.
And yeah, you can't necessarily measure that. That doesn't
Right.
come into a metric.
Yes.
And so I think that is sort of a relationship between sort of Western values of like production and
Okay,
what are
okay.
the what did you produce?
Right.
That is something
That we value.
profitable.
That we
and this, that,
value.
and Exactly.
Yes, yes.
Is there not something valuable in that child being, whatever experience that they may have, just being able to have a couple of hours of peace, tapping into something that some power within them that may or may not lead them to college. College is not the end all be all. I mean, and
Right,
and I'm
right.
tired of people saying it that way.
How many people, they're interested, how many people graduated? When I had a teenager that, okay, he has a bullet in his leg, and when he's with us, he's not with the gang.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, it's that simple.
Yes, and so.
But there are people that would, in my world, that would say, well, don't mention the gang. Don't mention he had a bullet in his leg. Well, how are you going to understand what we're doing if you don't know what's going on, what's happening? If you don't know the environment, if you don't understand any of that. And if you have never done an art project, you don't understand what we're doing. Because it's like saying, it's like a person making a judgment about singing who never sung a song before.
Right.
Or whoever never wrote music, was never in a choir. So now you're going to make a judgment call based on what?
Yeah. And just, I mean, the idea of things are, I mean, in a capitalist system, like there are only
Yes,
specific
yeah.
things that are considered of value,
Yes.
And I remember, kind of linking this back to my work and research as a grad student. I did my dissertation on public housing relocation outcomes for
Wow.
people who were forcibly removed out of public housing and into Section 8 because they tore down all the public housing in Atlanta.
And that's what's going to happen here next year. So
Yeah.
or the year after.
Well, what we found was that, and what was illuminating to me, because I've never lived in public housing. I've lived in Section 8, but never public housing. And I found that people had a strong connection in public housing, even though the experts were like, "This place is bad.
Right.
This needs
Right.
to be destroyed. There's
Right.
There's
Right.
nothing of worth here." Outsiders don't think there's anything of worth there.
Right.
The people who live there, saw a lot of value in where they lived.
Now maybe because I've been trying to figure out, and this is not to insult your field of study.
No.
But I'm trying to figure out. Okay,
Critiques are good.
What's the use? It's not a critique.
Okay.
But I'm trying to figure out. Okay, what is the relevance of sociology? I believe it's relevant, but I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
But hearing you say that, I'm beginning to understand a little bit about. It would be it's relevant that these hundreds of thousands of lives and families have been on this land for the last 50 years, of the last 100 years. That's what's relevant. That's what's important. That there's a society, there has been a society here, a way of living, a culture. People have grown up, they struggled maybe. But for instance, when I was, we're on the west side of College Hill Court. When I grew up here, I mean, our neighbors, looked out for us. When my parents was at work or something else, anything we did, they told on us. There was a type of, there's a community, that's, a community made up of people. People are important.
Right.
No matter where they are, So,
And that gets to my, kind of what I was talking about with our conception of citizenship.
Okay.
If you can be forced to leave your home of 20, 30 years by some higher ups, how much of a citizen are you? To be a citizen is to be seen and valued. As much as the most clearly valuable citizen.
Wow, you just said something there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. and so to speak to the relevance of sociology, sociology can influence policy, and these studies, such as there have been multiple studies of this whole experiment. Of public housing relocation, and the experiment was partially informed by sociologists who said concentrated poverty is a bad thing that leads to crime or exacerbates crime and all kinds of social ills. It produces an oppositional culture among people who are spatially isolated, so they need to be dispersed amongst mixed income groups so that they can, maybe even learn to kind of adopt these middle class values and so on and so forth. So these are what experts are saying based upon studies about concentrated poverty from, urban sociologists, for example.
And that's definitely looking at it from the outside.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, what I found working with, so I had to, again, how my early years community organizer prepared me for later work. As a PhD student, I interviewed many public housing residents, both. Well, I don't think I did the beforehand. I did after. I wasn't on the project yet. So I interviewed them after they had been moved to Section 8 housing. And what I found was that I didn't know, again, because I've never lived in public housing. Yes, the ties, the bonds are not like anything I've experienced living anywhere. It is a different type of, and probably in middle class people would not be able to understand. You wouldn't be able to understand unless you're there. I found out that people love their communities. I found out there were public housing reunions. I was at a park one day in Atlanta, just randomly, and I saw a bunch of people at several pavilions, and I was just like, oh, I wonder what's going on over there. So I walked up, I asked what was going on. They're like, oh, this is a public housing reunion for this public housing complex that got demolished 10 years ago. And that was just the older folks. The young folks had a whole separate, this was a big party. They had DJs, there was pictures of people, who have passed, all the memories. And so I just kind of did informal interviews where I was just chatting with people. And the lady was like, I've never been happier than when I was in public housing. She was like, it was like family. So you're breaking up families in essence.
Right.
And but they don't know that. and they think what they have and what they believe is better. So again, that ethnocentrism
Yes.
is better than what you're living in, because the dominant narrative is that there's nothing of value in public housing. Like, it's bereft of anything, but actually there's a lot. And people, the older people had a role,
Yes.
as like the mother, of the community, or this
Yes.
and that. And everybody had different roles,
Right.
and I mean, it's its own sort of ecosystem, if you will.
Yes, I agree.
And I learned that in lieu of kind of sort of finances, they depended on each other through a bartering network. So
Oh, yes.
if you didn't, maybe you didn't have a car,
Right.
but you knew someone had a car. Okay,
Right.
I'm going to break you off something to take me to
Yes.
the store, and this reciprocity, which again is not
Yes.
valued in a capitalist system. Okay, so that is not, even though it is valuable, our ways are valuable. Folk ways are valuable, but within a capitalist system, within a bureaucratic sort of medicalized, like, all of these institutions deem their way as the only way, and other ways as, I mean, they don't see it.
They don't. We applied for a grant from the city. I was just thinking about that, and I found out that the organizations that got the grant, and good organizations, but for the most part, why? And I'm like, well, why would you ask us to apply for this grant when you're going to give it to these huge organizations that get in millions of dollars? Now, why should I compete with the Hunter Museum,
Right.
the Creative Discovery Museum? And now they're going to come here and do what we're doing? Is that what's going to happen? And and the grassroots organizations who've been doing, like we've been doing for 14 years, get nothing. Why not help? Why not help those already at ground level doing the work? Thankless for the most part from the broader community, not from the clients or the people that we work with. Why not help? It's kind of like they want to perpetuate it. That's why there's no trust. There is no trust. I hate that word mixed, what is it, mixed income or whatever. Because the people that you are moving off the land will not be moving back here because they're not mixed. They're not middle class.
No.
They won't be able to afford the new housing here, even though you're telling, it's like, it's
I
like
hate that term.
all
It's very
the lies.
misleading. It's very misleading.
It's-
I mean, in my mind, I used to think,
Affordable housing.
oh, mixed income, so it's 50-50? Oh, that's great. They're setting aside 50 units. No, it's like 6 out of like 500. I mean, just
Right. Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
And there was, I remember a lady who I interviewed, a couple of elderly women who were moved into Atlantic Station. I don't know if you've ever heard of Atlantic Station in Atlanta, but it was this like huge development near Georgia Tech, and young, upwardly mobile people mostly like moved there, a lifestyle community, if you will. And asking her about like how she liked, she was like, "Oh my goodness, like the amenities are amazing, but I'm lonely because nobody talks to me." And she is, an elderly Black woman in a sea full of like, 20 something, early 30s, mostly white kids. And she doesn't have a place. Like, she's been uprooted from her place. But on paper, in measurement, yes, you are in a better place, technically, from all, again, metrics. But she doesn't have that connection anymore. She's just.
So how do we change our society to value people more than metrics? Because, for instance, I was thinking about when I lived in College Hill Courts, we did not have air conditioning.
Crazy.
And so this is like in the 60s, okay? 60s and 50s, late 50s and 60s. So we had to get window fans because no air conditioners were provided. And today, nothing has changed.
Are you serious?
I am serious.
Wow.
So my thought is this: if you want their lives to be better, why not upgrade the units?
That's yeah. I mean,
And why not upgrade?
They
I mean,
know-
matter of fact, my mother had a garden in the backyard. There used to be fences around the backyards, so we could plot. We had a little plot of land, and so she had a garden. She loved the garden coming from the country,
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of nice,
Yeah.
And all the fences are gone now. So it seems to be worse than the 50s to me. Here.
Probably.
Now, if you care about these people so much, why are they living in brick buildings with no air conditioning? See, people don't value people. I just said yesterday, I say this at least once or twice a week to my wife, Iantha. Don't nobody care about black children. That's how it appears to me, in the work that we're doing. That's what, I mean, it seems like nobody actually cares. Everybody's involved in metrics, but what about people? What about human beings? And when I think about that word, sociology, I'm thinking about the social construct.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We work with that a lot. And I mean, as it relates to metrics, first of all, capitalism, within capitalism, people are only as valuable as what they produce. Unfortunately. So, and, with the issue of public housing, why it has not gotten better, the government considers public housing to be a failed experiment. They want to dismantle all of it, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And they do not see any value in that. That is a relic of the 20th century.
Okay.
And yeah, in terms of value in public housing and just the lives of just, I mean, I'm sorry, we should be valuable. We are valuable intrinsically, completely divorced of
Yes.
what we can produce, and with these kind of other like funding institutions or whatnot, they want to metrics. Honestly, I would say to maybe partially just pat themselves on the back, like, see, I'm a good person, or this and that and the other. And I wish in your grant application you could put, the outcome is caring for black children.
I
Okay,
do.
good. Well, that's why you're not getting funding.
Small funding, It's like.
But I love that.
I mean, we started this with no money, and so we, to us, it's a calling on our lives. It's part of being a human being for me.
Yes.
So the only reason we started a nonprofit is because we used up all of our art supplies. I didn't have any more art supplies, and said, well, how can we get some more art supplies? Well, we could start a nonprofit. We had been discussing it maybe 3 or 4 years. Did not want to start a nonprofit because I knew what was coming, what we was going to have to deal with.
Right.
But we needed art supplies for these kids. So one child is so important. I met a first grader yesterday. I think his name is Aiden. First grader. I can see his talent already.
That's great.
I mean, he's telling stories with his art already. That's powerful.
Yes.
I mean, I think as the village, we should surround this guy. Mm-hmm. Make sure that he stays with Splash, basically, because if you're going to make some good art, you're going to need to know who you are. So I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you're going to understand who you are. But not that we're teaching history or politics. We don't do any of that. But
Yeah.
I am history. So
Yeah, yes, you are.
we are history. So
Yeah.
just by being in the presence of people who look like him and his parents and whatever, encouraging him and teaching him, I think it could be a powerful thing. To me, that's that's why we should be funded. If it's just for one kid.
And it may require the village approach, collectivism, instead of,
That's the
again,
future. I believe that's
relying
the future.
on
I think that's the future.
okay, just,
Yeah. I don't know how to do it though, but
just relying on each other,
yes. Yes.
other folks like us to support, the work
Especially
that
those
you do.
of us who, because I know a lot of people, and there are some of us who have done well, but they don't give back to the community. Now, in the 50s and the 60s, because of segregation, you had to live in the community
Yep.
no matter how well you're doing. Mm-hmm. So just by being there, you was giving back, and you was a part of what was going on. Mm-hmm. Somebody could knock on your door,
Yep.
and you could be a part of it. But many times and this is just my point of view as an artist, okay? I'm not a professional in your field of study, but to me it's so simple. Having done ministry for years and ministered in the jails and prisons and the streets and all that, it's not rocket science.
Yeah.
It's just for you to say, okay, I'm just going to help somebody. Like you said,
Yeah.
what you wanted to do. You want to help. It is not difficult to
Oh, yeah.
help somebody. All you need is a want to. But many times when we get in our positions, at least here in Chattanooga, the black people that I know, there's no reaching back. All of a sudden there's, it's like they forgot where they came from, And I don't think it takes a lot. It doesn't take, you don't have to, we'll be here on the ground. You don't have to be on the ground.
Yeah.
Just give us some money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we'll do it.
Make sure I'm on the mailing list.
Yeah, just hook me up. Give me, just break me off. Just introduce me.
Yeah.
Just something as simple as that.
I've been trying to get the lay of the land of Black Chattanooga, and
it's difficult, I think, and I grew up here, so it's
Yeah.
difficult for me to get the lay of the land.
And it's probably changed since a lot since you were here before.
And it's evolving as we speak.
Yeah, and currently evolving. There are folks. Just so coming from
People come over here. Sorry to cut you off.
Please.
During an election, black people come over here, stand on our steps and give their campaign speech.
That's it.
But you don't see them no more. People who grew up over here. It's kind of like, I understand survival of the fittest, but you've made it now. You have survived. So it's like we take on other cultures. And it's like we don't have confidence in who we are as a people or
Right.
as a culture. And I may not ever see it, but in my vision, in my artistic vision, I have seen a future where we did value our survival in the West and who we are and the strength that it took to survive and what we've gained. And we look back, when we saw SPLASH, I was looking for a little Charlie Newton. We see the value in that little kid. Mm-hmm. And you look for yourself back there.
Yeah.
And you go find yourself, and you find out there's probably hundreds of you that's gonna come. I think it's simple. It's not really complex, and it don't take a whole lot of money. But when you reward the Hunter Museums, and I'm all for the Hunter Museum. You know, I partner with them and everything, but
They have millions,
It's
tons
not
of millions
compared
of
to
dollars.
SPLASH
That's crazy.
and the
No.
Creative Discovery Museum. It's like, why waste our time inviting us to this meeting and
For
wasting
diversity.
our time? You know, you're wasting my
Look
time.
who we invited.
You're not, yeah.
It checks
yes.
off our metrics.
And now you go through this whole long process, you know. It's like, what about these kids?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like adults. No, I love the children. I have major issues with adults.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
adults are the
it
problem.
is the adults that's keeping this bad stuff going.
Yeah, I agree.
But so how does I want you to tell me in the next few minutes. We're going to stop in a few minutes,
Okay.
but the next few minutes, your work, what you're doing, enlighten us about what you're doing, the value of it, and I don't know if you're doing any research or anything like that, but what gets you up in the morning and gets you excited?
Coffee gets me up. I mean, I have to say, not being a morning person, but I'm an urban sociologist with a background in studying public housing. Since I've been in Chattanooga, however, I've been a part of the Smart Cities initiatives, which, I feel like I'm straddling sort of two areas here, because my interpretation is that, Chattanooga is trying to, in sort of the process of reinventing itself as this city of innovation, and trying to attract people to come here as sort of an alternative, and burgeoning Silicon Valley. And I just see a lot of people left out in that process, and I want to do something about it.
Okay.
And because, as someone from Atlanta, coming here, I do see, well, I'm just like, this feels very segregated. It feels like a very segregated city. It seems like, there are Black people here, and Latinx folks, but they're like very much kind of off to the side, not really a part of the kind of mainstream of Chattanooga and this future that Chattanooga is trying to construct of itself. And so I'm hoping to work with, I largely work with engineers, computer scientists, to leverage these smart city technologies that are already here, so nothing to do about it, leveraging them to address longstanding urban issues. So, for example, currently I'm working on a mobility project with CARTA, with some engineers and computer scientists from Vanderbilt, to try and introduce a transit alternative that is more efficient and can better meet people's needs. It's almost like a Dalla ride. It is an on-demand micro-transit system. And so as a sociologist, and the sociologist coming from the sort of place and perspective and lens that I'm coming from, I'm like, okay, let's not just sort of innovate for the sake of innovation, some new shiny thing that really doesn't meet the needs of people who are existing transit riders. Because the initial push is to, how do we get more people to ride the bus?
Right.
And,
Yes.
we're looking for people that don't have to ride the bus.
Right.
And I'm like, well, let's focus first on the people who are currently riding the bus and depend on the bus.
And that's to bring them
see-
downtown. Is that to bring them downtown or into this?
Just to
you know-
connect, just to
Okay.
have people riding the bus more in general, to reduce congestion and and just again to have more people riding the bus.
Okay.
What are the existing needs? What needs aren't being currently met by the existing system, so we can know how to design a better system for these people, not those people who are who already have transit.
Who could have
Exactly.
the choice whether they want to ride a bus.
Exactly.
Right.
So I kind of utilize that perspective in trying to, talk to and center marginalized communities first, addressing those needs before we and seeing how the technology can address those needs before going off to just like, oh, let's create something that is for everybody, but really it is designed with the needs of, already privileged groups in mind. Like we already have that. They're good. I promise you. If we can take care of these folks, it will ultimately, we need to do this
Yes.
trickle up, not this trickle down
Yes,
thing. This
yeah,
trickle
like
down
that.
doesn't work.
Right.
So that's what I'm currently working on.
Okay.
And I conducted a small related study that preceded this larger study of, just interviewing people in a public housing project here who did not have reliable transportation, about what their experiences were, what their needs were, where they would like to go that they currently don't go. And I just found it illuminating, which kind of informed and inspired my talk on mobility and citizenship. Here we have a city who has been on the Outdoor Magazine, Best City Ever twice in the 2010s. And, the city is packaging itself as like this outdoor getaway and wonderland, as well as this city of innovation. And we have people who live here, who have lived here, born and raised, who can't get to Signal Mountain or to the hiking trails that we, profess, and really can't leave the general area. The title of my paper starts with, I just don't go nowhere. Because that is how people coped with having inadequate access. They resigned to just not going anywhere. They just give up the day. The woman literally said, you just give up the day. So you have people, children, women talk about how she would like to take her kids on a picnic, but by the time you gather up all the items and this and that, it was just too difficult. Just because a bus comes doesn't mean it's accessible.
Yes.
Accessible isn't just like, here's a stick in the side of the road, there's a bus stop. Access, like I mentioned to you, is a matter of degrees and has multiple dimensions.
Yes.
And so we have a large group of our citizenry who cannot participate in this thing that we're selling to outsiders.
Right.
And then are you going to have the folks who've been born and raised here? That perpetuates their second-class citizenship in their own city.
Yes.
So I have a problem with that, and I hope that my work can lessen that at the very least as Chattanooga grows.
Awesome. Powerful. And you just stopped and just cut it off right there.
Sometimes I just my brain just stopped like that's it.
I was riding in the rocket like Stevie Wonder said. You brought it to a stop. But she dropped the mic. I'm convinced. I really want to read that paper.
Okay.
Well, Chandra, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Charlie.
I appreciate you.
It was always great talking to you.
Yeah, it's good talking to you, and wow. I mean, you've given us a lot to think about, and our viewers. Hey.
Yes, let's talk some more.
Oh, let's do it. Let's do it. And I want to thank you for joining us, and until next time, this has been Conversations with Charlie Newton. See you next time. Bye-bye.